Sassy Jack Stitchery is sponsoring this week's show with Roberta Wagner. Sassy Jack's recently introduced Black Swans Studio, a coalition of like-minded needlework artisans created by Kim Young and Jackie Duplessis. Black Swans Studios will focus on sharing collected knowledge and skills with today's needleworkers through multiple learning channels. The first event from the studios will be March 19 to 21 in Asheville, North Carolina. It will feature an impressive museum-quality band sampler from 1747, and registration will open December 15. Learn more and put your name on the contact list at blackswansstudios.com. Sassy Jacks also has in stock the new Design Collective Christmas book from the publishers of Inspirations magazine and a limited number of copies of the 2023 Whitney Antiques exhibition catalog. Order now before they're gone. There's much more going on at Sassy Jacks, and you can keep up with all of it through the Sassy Jacks website, sassyjackstitchery.com, the Jacks Journal newsletter, the Black Swan Studios website, or the Sassy Jacks Facebook page. Put your name on the various lists so you don't miss out on the excitement. Thanks to Sassy Jack Stitchery, and now our conversation with Roberta Wagner. Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr.
And I'm Beth Ellicott.
And you're listening to Fiber Talk, the twice-weekly podcast for needlework artists. Our artist this week is textile artist Roberta Wagner. Roberta, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. Wow, we started to research you. At least I know for me, it was going to be a 2-hour effort, and about 6 hours later, I finished up. We had some fun here.
Yes.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, lots going on. The one that stood out for me, that was yesterday, and so I get a little time to think about it. But you describe yourself as an intuitive artist, and that you don't know how things are going to come out till you've finished them or are well underway. Fascinating to me because I think most people start out with a plan.
Well, I think that's true, and sometimes I start out with a plan, but I think my best work is always when I'm just drawn to the materials themselves and feel inspired to start putting things together. And so usually those are my best pieces. And so that's why I call myself an intuitive artist. And also because I think when I am being intuitive as opposed to, kind of using rational thought and planning what I want to do, I tap into something that's beyond me, and I get help from the universe in trying to do something.
Okay. Yeah, it's just it's interesting because it seems like you just start. Is it color that starts you, or a piece of material, or do you just start putting stuff down and seeing what happens?
So I would say it varies over time. Sometimes it's the color or whatever. So lately what I've been feeling is I just feel this need to brush quickly on paper with beeswax, with paint, and then see what happens. And so it's this kind of very vague feeling. And when I look at the pieces now, because I have started some of that, they feel very ethereal to me, and it feels a lot like wind and sky and kind of the movement of sky. And so my guess is it's because I'm changing so much right now. It's been now 4 years since my husband passed away. And I think the grief is leaving, probably not leaving forever, but softening.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of kind of that feeling of a little bit more freedom and a little bit more joy.
Oh.
So I don't know for sure that that's what the pieces will end up being about. I just know that I have this feeling to, move quickly and work much larger than I usually do.
Oh.
Because I like to do small pieces, and probably will come back to that. I doubt that I'll ever leave that completely. But for example, when I did January of 2023, I wanted to find some regular creative practice that I could just stay in touch with my art on a weekly basis, instead of sometimes, you let time go by and things have slipped. And a lot of people have said that they try to make one piece a week or stitch every day on a particular thing. And I thought, I don't think I have the discipline to do that because stitching every day feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know that I could do that. And finishing a piece a week somehow felt like, well, what would the piece be? What would I? So instead, I started this idea of doing 9 very small pieces a week, which sounds like more than one piece a week, but it actually wasn't because they were so small. And also, I had a bunch of old pieces that didn't really sing to me. They didn't, when I looked at them, they didn't make me feel wonderful. So whenever I have pieces like that, I kind of tuck them away and think about them for a while. But a lot of them had a lot of stitch on them and a lot of time had gone into them. And so I started by just tearing those pieces up and making 9 little piles and then adding to them and doing different things with them. And I ended up doing it until the end of January. I thought I'd do it all year, but I just did it till the end of April. So it was 16 weeks. And it ended up being just a fabulous practice for me. And when I look at the pieces now, many of them, I burned the edges of these tiny little pieces. And covered old stitch in beeswax so you can barely see it, and then added new pieces to it. And I think it was part of this healing and letting go of grief process for me. This burning edges, covering past things in a more muted, softening tone. And so it was a wonderful thing to do. And I had picked 9 as just, I like that grid of 9. It feels so complete. But then it was really interesting. About halfway through, I was working on this series called Super Bloom and doing 9 pieces for each season as part of this weekly practice. And about halfway through, I got to the summer months and the 9 pieces felt too big for the summer pieces. So I ended up tearing the 9 pieces into 27 pieces and burning the edges and stuff. But that's really something that's nice about 9, because it can move to something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, I'm probably talking way too much, but
no.
That's some of my thinking.
That's why you're here. We want you to talk a lot. I so enjoy. I connected with your artwork and so enjoyed it because many years ago, for many years, but some time ago now, I did a lot of photography, and my love was macro photography. And so people would say, all right, macro photography, that means I'm filling the frame with the bloom of a flower or whatever. And no, for me, it was closer than that. I want these 3 petals, or this petal in this leaf, or I want to go to a piece of wood and I want this section of grain. And so I would do that. And when you started talking about cutting your pieces apart because there was little things inside of it that were more intriguing to you than the whole, I really related to that because that's the approach that I took with my photography. And I just so enjoyed it because such a small area. I would go with other photographer friends, say to a botanic garden for a shoot, and I would be there at one flower for, half hour, 45 minutes, and they wanted to move on, but I wasn't done. There was so much in that small little area, and it seems like that's what you find.
I think that's really true. And I love the magic of what you're talking about, because I think it's when we zero in, either through a microscope, but you can get the same kind of images when you look at outer space. I think it's that idea of very small and very big that has captured me, because I think it's it's a little bit that oneness of everything. So in that flower petal, you can see many different things. It's
Yeah.
not just a flower petal. It could be just a texture or a grain or an old stone wall. So I think that's what I love about that.
Yeah, and I love the way you went to the other extreme. All right, let's take the galaxies and explore that because again, completely flipping it over, but the same concept.
Exactly. And so it's been a long time that I've been really intrigued by that. It was about 40 years ago. I was driving home from upstate New York down to Washington, D.C., and kind of just intuition, I think, pulled me off the road into this little old bookstore. And I found this fabulous book called The Interior World of Gemstones by E. Gublin, I think it is. The book is out of print now, but I still have my copy. And he took photographs of gemstones under high magnification. And I just pored over that book for hours and hours. And there's so much in that magnification of gemstones, but of really anything else that you can see really the whole world. And that's part of my love of abstract, because I do like it to feel like it could be just about anything.
I was just thinking that, for me, you when I first heard you said you took your bigger pieces and you ripped them up, I was like, so many people cringe when you say, like I've said that about a piece. I'm gonna just tear this into pieces. I don't like it. I think it would be better smaller. And people are horrified because they think, well, you spent so much time on that piece. How can you rip it up? But it's better smaller, or it's better taken apart and re-put back together. And I think that's what your work says to me. You're not afraid to recreate your work, I guess.
That's really true. And I do think, I mean, I make a lot of work. I think some artists, I just tend to be really productive, I guess, because, I like to make art, so that's really what I like to do. So it loses some of its preciousness when you make a lot of it. and but also it's really important to me that each piece that I have kind of makes my heart sing. And if it doesn't, I put it away, because some feel stiff, and it's kind of like I've talked about this other places that, sometimes you can learn the most from those pieces that feel stiff, or that's the main feeling I don't like in my work, is if it feels stiff. And usually that happens when I'm thinking too much, or I'm thinking too much about finishing something. Oh, I've got to get this finished. Whenever I start feeling that way, I just stop, because the piece will end up feeling forced, and it somehow doesn't have that joy or whatever it is that I'm feeling at the moment. It loses it, and it just doesn't have that same energy. So when I have pieces like that, I don't feel that they're precious. I might have spent 20 hours stitching, and I just go, well, okay, so I'm going to tear that out. I don't know. So, and I do, and in the end, so far, I haven't torn up any pieces that I don't love the new pieces for.
Yeah. There's something in there. It's just a matter of bringing it out.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we talk about your husband and the aftermath?
No.
I don't want to get you upset, but
no, it's fine.
I was fascinated because there's so much of your writings. Obviously, I mean, you lost a spouse. That so much of your writing after the fact is going to focus on that, and but we've talked many times on this show about the power of needlework, textile art, in helping you through difficult times. And as I'm reading your writings and researching, I wondered how much that helped you. Did you find a solace, an escape that allowed you to deal with it better, or was there a process? Did it affect your art?
Oh, that's so true. It definitely helped me deal with the grief. Because when I'm making art and doing stitch work in particular, but both, I get totally lost in it. And so, and enjoy the flow process of that. So it can give you moments of respite. And so, as I'm sure you know, I was diagnosed with cancer right after my husband passed away and was going through chemotherapy, and so was very weak and could not do very much at all. But I could stitch, and I could sit there and work on the stitch and kind of get lost in it. And I made some work that I really loved during those years. So I think it's so important to be able to do something like that when you're grieving.
Yeah, so it did help. I know. I shed a tear or two when she lost her husband, and then she ends up with cancer. Oh, doc, just beat on me. Oh.
Well, I'm actually so glad that I didn't know I had it until after he passed away, because it would have been so difficult. I had so much trouble with treatment that if I had been going through treatment and trying to help him with his Parkinson's at the same time, we would have lost a lot of really important moments together.
Yeah.
So I was glad I didn't go to a doctor, because they would have found it.
Yeah.
And I would have ended up. So sometimes, it works out okay. And I've been 3 years in 100% remission. So I've recovered from the chemo, so I'm doing really well.
Oh, that's outstanding. That's outstanding.
That's
Good
great.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're clearly a different artist. Are you a better artist since your husband passed, do you think? Or do you have a different perspective?
Oh, gosh. I think I'm a better artist. I'm not sure it's because of Bruce's passing, but I think that the more you work and the more you think about it, and the more you spend time with it, I think you get better.
Yeah.
And so I do think I'm a better artist than I was. It's not always an improvement. I mean, I think about some artists who aren't necessarily better as they get older and as they work, because it's easy to get stuck,
right,
and keep trying to do the same thing that's successful. So I think one of the biggest challenges for artists as we age is that we do continue to explore different ideas, different methods, different materials, different techniques, and also stay open to what might be coming next.
Yeah.
and not get into a formula, because there have been times in my art life that I've made things that I like so much I try to make it a formula, and boy, that just doesn't work. I mean, it ends up feeling stiff. It's that stiffness that I don't like. I want it to feel fresh and new, and like there was some risk taken and some connection to the moment that it's being made. So I've gotten better at doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I really catch myself really fast now if I'm doing formula stuff.
So how do you think, as an artist, you stay fresh? Play, workshops?
I think for me, the single most important thing is not to stay focused on production. Because if you're thinking about, I've got to make so much work for a show, or so much work for this, or so much work for that, it puts a pressure on that I think can keep you doing work that is going to be successful. So for me, anyway, I make a lot of stuff. So I always have a whole bunch of stuff. So if I'm going to do a show, I have plenty of stuff I can pull for a show, which is lucky for me, because then, like right now, I'm kind of in this period where I'm not really quite sure what I'm doing, where it's going. And it's frustrating. You want to get back to that flow where you just love making what you're doing. And right now I'm kind of going back and forth and trying to decide. I did yesterday just start doing a whole bunch of French knots on a piece of painted washi paper, and it's been so fun to do that, and I like what I'm seeing. So, I never know. Maybe someday I'll end up tearing this up. But for right now, I'm really liking it. And and so one of my issues right now that I kind of am probably trying to think my way through when I should just be doing it, but is I do have this urge, as I say, to do these bigger pieces, but just paint or just ink or just dyes on either fabric or I use a lot of Japanese washi paper now, feels too boring to me. I feel like I have to add stitch or collage. But when you're doing big pieces, it's a little daunting to think about doing a lot of stitch. I mean, I might work on a piece for 2 months, and what if I decide to tear it up then? So, I mean,
all right.
So anyway,
okay, I've got to ask, what is washi paper? Okay, because I've heard of washi tape, but what's washi paper?
So it is, well, I may not give the best definition without actually looking at my notes, but this is how I think about it, and it's the kind of washi paper that I use. It's primarily Japanese. There is some Thai washi paper, but it mostly is made from, there's 3 different plants that are used in making washi paper. The two kinds of plants I use the most are kozo and gampi, Gampi. And so let me talk about the kozo because that's what I use the most of. So it's a plant that grows in both Thailand and Japan that I know of, maybe other places, but I use mostly Japanese kozo paper. It's hand beaten and then it's soaked in the river and sun dried, and this is the non-mechanical process. They do have some that use mechanical processes to make them, but I use mostly the totally handmade washi paper. So they beat it, they soak it in the river, they clean it, they let it get dyed in the sun, and then they do these other processes and put it together. And the result of it is a paper that is very tough, but very thin. So to me, it feels kind of like, it's not, of course, but it feels almost like a blend between cotton and paper. And so you can machine stitch on it real easily. You can hand stitch on it real easily. But for me, what I like compared to painting on cotton or silk is it absorbs the ink and paint very differently and in a way I like. So that's it. It's very different than washi tape.
Right. Okay. So, and that's why I was like, okay. And because I like every now and then to stitch through paper but I don't like the big holes it makes. And I don't always like the texture. I'm like, I might need to get a new art supply, Gary.
I was just gonna say, as soon as we're done here, you're buying a ream or a roll or whatever it comes in.
I feel an art day coming on too. I might be, my husband might be, I might disappear. Our library lets us use their huge tables and lets us, we play with paint and dye there because you need that big space.
You do.
And we just play there. And I'm like, I need to get some of this for the next time we play.
So there's a lot of different kinds of washi paper. And so I buy all of mine from the Paper Place in Toronto. It's just a fabulous resource. And they worked with me. I purchased 25 different kinds of washi paper in various price ranges in an 8 by 5 inch format. So they sent me that with all of the details on price and exactly how it's made and all of that. So I could pick what kind of paper I wanted for each project. And they're just fabulous. But it can be a little daunting to even pick what kind of washi paper you want because some of it is much thicker than others. But it has gotten so popular recently that I've noticed some art supply stores have a small selection of different washi papers. So,
Okay. Yeah.
but if you're going to have an art day, you might want to just look online at the Toronto Paper Place site.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then we can get a little bit of variety, and then just play with it. Because how will you know until you play?
Exactly. So when I got my 25 sheets, I actually did the same thing on all 25 sheets. I tried it with acrylic, with ink, with I did some botanical dye. I did machine stitch. I put India ink on it. I just wanted to see how the paper absorbed paint and how much of a hole it left. And sometimes some of the washi papers, they actually start with 2 sheets of paper that they adhere together with a little bit of rice flour paste. And those are great because sometimes I found the back side is better than the front side.
Right.
But that only works with some of the papers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you're using all the
I can
the
see
stuff.
Beth is gone. Beth is gone. She's just...
and then and then stamping on it. We like to stamp or do jelly prints. How will it take the, if you're doing a jelly print on it, I'm like, oh yes.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
25 pages. We could go through that fast. I'll tell you that right now. We start playing.
Yes, exactly. No, and there's some washi papers that are especially made for printmaking because these are the things that in Japan are used to make screens and light shades. And I mean, it's that tough. Washi paper is that tough.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can still stitch through it. So have fun with it.
Oh, that would be okay. Now you really got me going. Because if you could make a lamp shade with it, that's also on my to-do list. And I'm like, and I could stitch through it. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Collage it.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh. I can already tell that this podcast again is costing me money.
It's costing you money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We know what Beth's going to do the rest of the day.
Yes.
So, but it sounds to me like it's very durable ground material. Then you can pretty much do what you want with it and not have to worry about it coming apart on you.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it will. It is a paper, so it will. If you put water on it, it will tear easily. But yeah, no, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, and that in itself, if it has that property, because the straight edges, you don't necessarily want that when you're doing art. You might want to put water on it so you get the nice rough edge to get the look you want, and then sew it down like your work. It's just the layers. Yes. I think that's what calls to me about your pieces, because they have so many layers on them. It's not, you just didn't you can see some of them, and then some of them, it's like I'm looking in the screen and I want to touch them. I want to get closer to them and see, okay, what does she, we're always, I want to look underneath and get as close as you can. Okay, what's underneath there? What's there?
Yes. And I was layering my work really a lot a few years ago. So some of this new stuff I may not. I don't know. I kind of miss it though. So I suspect eventually I'll figure out how to incorporate more layers in it. But washi paper layers, great. And it also layers well with, I use a lot of organza silk and cotton voile and some canvas. And so you can mix all of it together and stitch all of it together.
Yeah, see. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Well, and your work shows that. You're looking at the images where you've done very simple stitches, but they tell a story, and that's what I'm always looking at when I look at art. I want to see. I don't necessarily need to know what maybe your story is, but it makes a reaction. It puts a story in my head. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I love it that it shouldn't be my story. I always hope that my work is universal enough that it is your story and not necessarily mine.
And
So
don't you
I
think
actually
art does that?
Yes, I do. I think art should do that. I think that's the gift.
One of the things that I pulled out of the research that stood out for me in researching you through your photography, your pottery, ceramics, and then your movement to textile art is, and you talk about you don't get stuck in a rut, is you feel a change coming. And I was so intrigued by that as you're working on your art, that you something happens to you and you feel that a movement on to something else. Is that a conscious thing, or do you feel that just in your hands and your work? And do you have to wait for it, or can you accelerate it? How does that work for you?
Well, I don't think I can accelerate it. It's usually a very frustrating time for me when I change.
Okay.
Because it's just not working for me anymore. I just can't seem to make anything the way I want it to be. And so then I have to really pay attention to what is of interest to me, what is pulling me. So there was quite a long time when I think I was really done with the ceramics. I think I did so many glaze tests, and I thought I was being careful with the chemicals, but I probably wasn't careful enough. And I felt that I just couldn't stand to be around them anymore. But I didn't know what to do. And so I started making gardens. I did a lot of gardening and really made some beautiful gardens. I'm not right now, but so the gardening was kind of this interim period because I was so frustrated with clay. And then all of a sudden, I just started feeling so drawn to silk and fabrics and, the lushness of it. And it was so soft compared to the clay. So I just kind of started poking my fingers in it. And then, it's like you have to learn a whole new medium, really. So I started doing basic classes and on stitch and, really basic stuff about, I think, well, what would it be, about 10 years ago. So I think it takes a long time to make the change. But like right now, I am feeling some kind of a change coming. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I don't know, but I think it's going to be different. So I'm kind of like, oh, okay, what now? It's part of the process. I
Yeah.
just think it is part of the process.
But
And I do.
But what I pick out of that then is you don't resist it. You embrace it and you look for it.
I think that's more true of me now than it might have been 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 30 years ago. I think now when I feel that happening, I'm kind of like, isn't this interesting? Okay. So, what can I do to and that's where I think having some kind of creative practice is helpful, where you're not trying to create something for sale or to create a finished piece. So whether it's an art journal or just some little thing that you do, I think it keeps you connected to the creative process without feeling that you've got to make something that's good, make something ugly. Now, I took a painting class when I first started painting again after having switched to textiles. I think that was must be about 6 years ago now. I took a class with Nancy Hillis, who's a great teacher, and she's written a really good book. I think it's called The Artist's Journey or something like that. And she talks about the importance of making ugly work, because it's the ugly work that shows you where you're going next. And so what she says to do, which I always do, is if you make something and you don't like it, put it away and then look at it again. I have enough of that stuff that I some of it is 6 months or 2 years or 5 years old. And sometimes I go back and look at it and think, why did I think that was so bad? That's kind of good, kind of interesting. And so it helps propel that process along of saying, okay, where is it that you do want to go? but by keeping at it. So like what I've had a back cold since I got back. I was lucky enough to be able to go to France for a couple of weeks, and I came back and got a back cold, so I haven't been able to do much. But so when I'm in this process right now of knowing that things want to change, but I'm not sure how, I'm going to go back to Nancy Hillis's process of working at least a half hour every day. If the things are ugly, fine. Just do what you feel like in the moment and stay with that. And it will give me clues on what it is that I want to do. That coupled with I'm doing a lot of more stitch than I've done in a while, because that can be very meditative. And as I kind of watch those two processes, I think I'll see where it is that I'm wanting to go next.
Interesting. So, and if it's another technique, you're okay with that?
Yes, I don't think I'll be switching whole mediums again. Okay. I think I'm really happy with the washi paper. I really like botanical inks, but I also like watercolor. And so I like my mediums, and I love organza silk. I love cotton foil. I love canvas. So I doubt that I'll switch from that. I may end up doing more machine stitch and less hand stitch on these big pieces. That's one of the things I want to kind of experiment with. So I'm going to paint these big pieces that I kind of like, tear them apart, stitch them together with machine stitch. That's one of the things I want to try and just see, does that do some interesting things for me? I don't know. Might be ugly.
Yeah, but hey, you're willing to try. I mean, that's the key. You're just willing to see what happens. Yeah. How does
I do. I think that's important.
Yeah. Now your paying job career as a bank regulator, you talk about stiff. I can't imagine a more stiff world. And I can see why you don't want it in your art.
Well, I haven't been a bank regulator for 30 years. I've been a consultant to bank boards of directors, mostly on risk management and a lot on organization and culture risks. So it's kind of the way people work in an organization and the risks of the way they're working and the influence of morale and stuff. So it's quite a bit softer than the pure bank regulator stuff. But I'm almost done with that now. I have one client that I still work with some, but I'm almost done with that. And I think for a long time, it created a really good balance in my life to have, that side of my brain working and staying connected with people and out in the world. Where for me, most of my artistic life has been very private and much more introverted. So I think now that's not so true, because as I have more time, I'm spending more time with other artists and going to galleries and doing shows and, the things you do when you're kind of putting your art out there. But when I was working as a bank consultant, I found I either had time to make art or to sell art. I really didn't have time to do much selling art at all. So I did sell some, and I did have a few shows, but I didn't spend much effort on that at all. So what happened is I had a whole bunch of stuff, and and when I got sick, and I have three very dear sisters, and one of them, who's very special to me, came up and she said, Roberta, you're going to have to deal with this, because I don't want to have to deal with it. You have to figure out what you want to do with all of this stuff.
Don't be dumping this on me.
don't make me try to figure out what to do with it. So I actually hired an art assistant. She's really busy right now because she's teaching at a local college. She's teaching ceramics, but she helped me get it all organized and put on Artwork Archive. And I started doing websites and started doing more things to put it out there. And then when I published my book, that got a lot of positive reaction. And so I have started selling it, and it's all very organized right now. So, and I am now just slowly slowly starting to find out what galleries might be good for me to work with, as opposed to me trying to sell it all myself. So it's a process.
Yeah. Yeah, but and you talked about that, how the business end of trying to sell your art was literally getting in the way of the art, and how the assistant freed you up for that. And I think so many artists run into that. At some point, you need to make some money off of it, or you want to, and pretty soon you're bogged down in business, and your art just suffers for it.
Yeah, and it's really easy to get caught up with what's going to sell then. So, which I think is really damaging to the creative process.
Yeah.
Because what people like, I can never figure it out. I really just can't. Some pieces that I absolutely love, nobody buys, and I love them. And some pieces that I think, yeah, well, that's okay, because I try not to sell anything that I don't like. So, it's okay, but, maybe not my favorite. And there's a lot of people wanting it. So it's a mystery. And I think we hurt our art by paying too much attention to, what's going to sell. But I think it's a real issue for artists. Do you let the art become your day job, or do you have another day job and then you let your art be your art? And I don't think there's any one right answer for that. I think everybody, some people that work as full-time artists, their work is amazing, and I just am in awe at it, and they stay fresh, and so that can be a great way to go. Yeah. When I tried that years ago, so I think it was maybe 25 years ago, I tried working full-time as an artist doing ceramics, and I found I worked too hard at it. I made it work. It wasn't fun anymore. So I went back to consulting, because and then I could play with the art and have it be more playful and fun, and I wasn't trying to make sure that I could sell it and make enough money at it. It's hard to make money as an artist. It just is, I think. Maybe that's my own, when they say that you let your own thoughts kind of interfere with what might happen. Maybe that's true of me, but anyway.
Well, but I think that's interesting, because it does, you're obviously good at bank consulting, and you needed that outlet maybe of that right brain, left brain sort of thing going on. And it was, if you didn't get rid of that part, your art suffered from it. It's like, I can't sit and just do my needlework. I do have to get up, and even if I don't, get up and do something else during the day, or else I feel like, no, this is not this. I'm spending too much time at this.
Yes, that's exactly it. And thinking too much about it, and trying too hard, and also, it was just good for me to be out and around people more, because my artwork is very private. I've always liked to do that by myself. I mean, I don't do well in workshops for the most part. I have taken a lot of classes, especially from Fiber Arts Take Two, which is a great Australian online fiber arts group, and they have some great courses. And I've taken a number of theirs, and they're fantastic, and I love learning the techniques and that sort of thing. But I get kind of shy when I'm in a group setting of working on things, so I don't do as well at that. The point I was making is, so the banking gave me a way to get out and among people. But I've worked really hard in the last 3 years, as I'm starting to retire from bank consulting, to get to know artists that I really admire and like to work with. And there's a group of 3 of us are going to meet in Portland in December to have a strategic planning session, like you'd have, only it's about art. So like, what do I think I'm doing really well? What do I think I need to do better at? Not just for the business side of things, but for the art itself. What, kind of to help me sort through that and come up with some goals. So I like being connected to other artists.
Don't you find that it feeds your own art when you meet with other artists?
Yes, especially if there's a simpatico. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because some artists I'm maybe not as in sync with, but and it doesn't mean that the work needs to be similar, but the thinking and the personality and all of that, and then the same challenges that they're, so many of. I think what surprised me when I started writing blogs about art was how it resonated with other artists. So I think so many of the issues that I deal with, other artists are dealing with too. So it helps to have people to talk to about those things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And just to bounce ideas off of sometimes. I find, when I meet with my art friends, we're all doing different things, but sometimes after I've met with them, if I've had a issue with a piece, all of a sudden that block is gone. If that makes sense.
That's great. It does make sense, and I think that's very common. And so it is good to get out there and find your artist.
Right. Find your tribe, as they say.
Yes, exactly.
And your writing does resonate. You have a talent there for describing what is going on in your head and what's going on with your art. I just inhaled everything you wrote in your blogs, and then of course your book. There's just a real talent for sharing that, and it comes through, and it makes you make it easy to connect with you and connect with what you're experiencing and what's going on in your head, and then when the art's there, you can see it. Here's how it manifested. It's a special talent, no doubt.
Oh, well, thank you very much. The book took me so long to write because I think finding that authentic voice when you're writing really, really is kind of hard. And so for me, I wrote the first version of the book and I read it. And just like when my art feels stuff, it just felt like it was a bunch of excuses, instead of, it didn't feel real. And I said, well, this isn't interesting even to me. And so I've done morning pages for probably 40 years, pretty religiously. And so I have done a lot of writing and always enjoyed writing because it's a way for me to kind of sort through what I'm thinking. And so what I did when I started working on rewriting the book was really saying at the end of each little chapter, each little essay, okay, what else? What's the other side of this? So instead of it being just one thing, then I wanted to, instead of just talking about frustration, what's the other side of frustration, for example? And how does that relate to the rest of my life? What is it about the creative process and making things? And how does that tie into the rest of my life, my relationships, my cooking, my gardening? So it was a really enriching process for me to go through. I loved it. And I still love that process of writing. And then at the end, I had, kind of gone through it as best I could. And then Erica Bauermeister, who writes fabulous books, I think The Scent Keepers is one, but she's New York Times bestselling author. And I can't believe it, but she took the time to give me feedback on the book, and she had me rewrite the whole first section, which had sounded a little too much like a narrative. And she said, you've got to make it sound like the rest of the book. So I rewrote that whole first section. So it took me a long time to do the book, but it was very enriching. I'm glad I did it, and I'm still working on that process. I'm in the process of starting to do shorter, maybe 30 to 50 page little booklets. Mm-hmm. So I'm working on one right now.
Can you tell people what a morning page is? Because I think that's a term some people might not know what you mean when you say that.
Oh, right. So Julia Cameron, who's written a lot of books on the creative process, wrote a book called The Artist's Way a long time ago. And in it, she talks about 3 different practices that she thinks are really helpful to artists. And one of them is to when you first wake up, take the first 45 minutes of every day and just write nonstop, whatever is on your mind, as a kind of a clearing, no holds barred. And she has a little bit more detail on it, but basically that's it. And you don't go back and read it again. You're not going to show it to anybody. It's just for you. It's just to write what you're thinking about in that moment. And so I do find it, I just can't quite imagine living without it, because it clears the slate for me in the morning. And another artistic practice she talks about, which I'm not as good about doing, but I'm hoping that I'm going to improve on, is to do an artist date where I think it's once a week, which I've never met, but at least once a month, maybe, where you go
right.
by yourself and do something that is just for the artist in you. So maybe that's an artist date, might be exploring washi papers, or going to a gallery, or just going for a walk and really by yourself and really paying attention to the surroundings. So anyway, so she's if some of your listeners haven't read The Artist's Way, I think that's a great book to read.
I find that interesting because you mentioned that, and before we were doing this interview, I had just recently restarted doing The Artist's Way and just started redoing the pages. And what has always held me up on those morning pages is it's just garbage. And I'm always afraid someone's going to read them. So I've taken to ripping them out of my notebook and throwing them away, because no one's going to see them anyway. It is literally me writing nonsense in the morning, and why keep them? And that was just really freeing to be able to say, I'm not keeping those. And that brain dump in the morning, I think, is reflecting more. And I'm kind of feeling the urge to be more experimental in what I'm already working on. Like, well, you don't have to do it exactly this way. Let's try something new.
That sounds just great. That sounds just great. And I think it's really, by tearing them and throwing them away, it feels like, okay, nobody is going to read this. This is just for me. So right. I like that idea. I haven't done that. I have kept, I've thrown away a couple of decades of them, but I still have a couple of other decades of them. And I think I've told my sister, don't read them. And so maybe I need to do what you did and just throw them all away. But I do sometimes like to take pages out of them, and I tear them up and put them in my artwork. I paint them, I kind of cover over them, and I tear them up, and then I put them in the artwork.
Yeah, and I've thought about doing that too, because I have done that before. But it's like, no, let's just get rid of them.
I think it sounds like a perfect thing to do. Just get rid of them, because they're not meant to be reread or studied, or, it's just a brain dump.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you finding it helpful?
Yes. And I've resisted it. And you talked about not doing the artist date. I'm like, there's no way I can go by myself, to go to an art gallery once a week. I live in the middle of a cornfield. But, I do go for walks by myself, and that is and to slow down and look, I think, is what I need to start doing. But yeah, doing the writing is helpful.
So maybe that's your artist date, is just going for the walks. And I'm a big walker too. So maybe I need to change my idea of what is an artist date. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be, maybe it's just going for a walk and really paying attention to some particular thing. Maybe on that walk, you really want to look at rocks, or you really want to look at leaves, or something.
The bark on trees, the lichen, mushrooms is the other thing I've been looking a lot at lately. And I'm like, okay, why this fascination all of a sudden with mushrooms that are growing, because they grow a lot here in the Midwest. And I'm thinking, So, yeah.
And they have interesting textures. So you know what I think, listening to this? I think both you and I are already doing artist dates. We've just defined it too narrowly.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Maybe that's it. And I think it does feed something, no matter where your art is taking you, it feeds something else inside of you. It feeds that inner artist that, we all have, that desire to be creative.
Right.
So, yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, and then to get together with friends and see what the washi paper does. I can already tell. I'm excited about that. I can't wait to text my friends and say, I have a new material for us to play with.
Cool.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Are you going to do overnight or 2-day shipping? I'm just asking.
No, well, we'll have to see.
If it's a pallet load, it might not be. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. I'll watch from the peanut gallery. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Roberta, and we should mention the book is called "Come Walk with Me." It's a marvelous piece of literature, just captivating. We get it off Roberta's site, robertawagner.com. Just a terrific thing. It's such a different style and structure for a book, because it's somewhat autobiographical, but it's also about art and your approach and basically just what's in your head. Was that what you set out to do, or did that evolve?
Oh, it evolved. It's kind of just like my artwork. I started out thinking I wanted to write about why art has been so important to me, because I couldn't figure out why. I mean, I structured my whole life so that I would have time to make art. Consulting gave me enough time because I could kind of set my schedule. I spent a lot of money on it. I always had to have a studio. So I was just like, okay, why have I been doing all of this? I'm not selling it because I don't really have time to sell it. So that's what started me writing it. And then as it really did just evolve. But I think it is a different kind of, in a way it's an autobiography, in a way it's a memoir, but it's really not. It's a different kind of memoir. And I think I tried to find a publisher for it. And the reaction I got was it doesn't fit in any of the categories.
Yeah.
So,
typical.
It is different.
Typical.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't put it on a shelf somewhere with a label on it. So we're not interested. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the kind of book though. And Beth even mentioned it, I think before we started, where it's a quick read, but you want to go back. Because I noted several things, and now talking to you, I'm going back to that book to reread those sections. It's one of those that it's not a one and done thing, and I think that's so cool about it.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. I do hear that quite a bit, so that makes me feel really good. And I have to go back and read it sometimes, and think, wow, that was pretty smart. I forgot about it. Well, I don't know.
And the images are beautiful. I don't know who did your photography. I don't know if you did it yourself, but they are very well done. And I love the clean layout of the the blank behind the art, so you can look at the art.
Well, so Tanya Jenny did the layout for me. It's Tanya Jenny, Jenny. She's fabulous. And I had a terrible time with the photographs. I mean, I can't tell you what I went through. And then finally, a good friend of my husband's, who is a photographer, came and took all of them for me. And then I edited them somewhat. But it was a nightmare. I now know how to do it, but it's very expensive to hire a photographer.
Yep.
To take good quality pictures. I really couldn't afford to do it. And there's so many photographs in there. I think there's I don't remember how many. There's like 100 photographs. So it would have been just prohibitively expensive to hire somebody to do it. For me, I mean, I guess if you have like I don't know. Anyway, thank goodness for this friend who did it, because I think Tanya went through about 4 or 5 different iterations with me of reshooting all of the photographs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, if it's any comfort, my paying job is magazine editor, and I've been doing it for 45 plus years, and that has never changed. The graphics and the photos are the hardest part. I'll get done editing an article. All right, now how am I going to illustrate this thing? And and we use mostly stock photography, but it's an awful lot of time getting the right photo that says the right thing. I don't care what you're publishing. That is the tough part. And no, I appreciate what you went through, and you did it well. It was worth the effort because it makes all the difference. But to me, it's always the hardest part. And it's the part I hate, because it just sucks up so much time. But if it's not right, it doesn't. Then everything isn't right. And worth it.
Well, thank you. I did work hard on it. I was a perfectionist about that.
Yeah, you have to be. It's because
it's nicely done.
It's the visual part for so many people. That's what draws them in and makes them read. People who just want words, they don't care if there's ever a picture. But most people need to have some visual, and if it's not done right, they say in video, in making videos, that if you can have a horrible video, but if the sound is good, you can get away with it. And I think the same is for printed material too. If you can have all the great words in the world, but you have to have the right visuals, or it just doesn't work. Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the trouble.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And of course, as artists want it to look good.
Right.
I mean.
Your
right.
audience kind of demands it. Yeah.
Yeah. And me, I have to, it has to look okay. Anyway, so Tanya Jenny is great if anybody else wants to have some desktop publishing done.
Yeah.
But I will say too, I know there's a lot of negatives about Amazon, and I thought long and hard before I actually had mine published by Amazon. But their print quality has been really good, with only one exception. And the thing that has made it good for me and good for people that have bought the book is I have a lot of people from my Instagram, from around the world, a lot of Australians and Europeans and Japanese, and to mail if I print it here and have to mail it to them, the cost is just prohibitive. Where with Amazon, they can order it and they print it on site. And I ordered the highest quality printing that Amazon does, and I found that it was pretty darn good. I was really surprised. So that's, for people that want to have hard copy of something, it does make it possible.
Yeah. Roberta, we got to stop here. What a journey. Tremendous art. What the whole thing is just such an experience on so many levels. And thanks so much for sharing it and spending time with us.
Well, you two have been just a delight. So thank you.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much.
All right. And thanks to everyone for listening.